When transferring property in the Philippines, one document plays a very important role, the eCAR. Now, let's take a closer look and learn more about the eCAR. What is an eCAR? The Electronic Certificate Authorizing Registration, or eCAR, is an official document issued by the Bureau of Internal Revenue. The eCAR serves as confirmation that the required taxes for a property transaction have already been paid and cleared. Without it, the transfer of ownership cannot move forward. In fact, the taxes associated with the eCAR are often the most expensive part of a property transfer. When do you need an eCAR? An eCAR is required whenever ownership of a property changes. This commonly happens in the following situations. First, sale of the property. When a property is sold and ownership is transferred through a deed of absolute sale. Second, donation of the property. When a property is given as a gift through a deed of donation. Lastly, inheritance. When heirs transfer property after the death of the original owner through an extrajudicial settlement of estate. In each of these cases, the BIR must review the transaction and confirm that the appropriate taxes have been paid before issuing the eCAR. Requirements to obtain an eCAR. To process an eCAR, several documents are usually required. First, one of the following notarized documents must be presented: deed of absolute sale or deed of donation or extrajudicial settlement of estate. These documents establish the legal basis for the transfer of ownership. In addition, several supporting documents are typically required, including a certified, true copy of the title, the latest tax declaration, tax clearance, or the latest real property tax receipt, valid IDs of the buyer and seller, including their specimen signatures, TIN verification for all parties involved. Depending on the situation, additional documents may also be required. For example, a special power of attorney or SPA, if someone is authorized to act on behalf of a buyer or seller. If the buyer or seller is abroad, the SPA must be apostilled to be recognized in the Philippines. Photos of the property for verification purposes. A certificate of non-tenancy from the Property Management Office to confirm that the property is not being used for business purposes. These documents allow the BIR to review the transaction and determine the correct taxes that must be paid. How to get an eCAR? The process for obtaining an eCAR usually follows several steps. First, prepare all the necessary transaction documents. Second, submit the documents to the BIR district office, often through the O-Net section, which handles one-time tax transactions. Third, the BIR will then evaluate the documents and compute the taxes due. Fourth, the required taxes must be paid. These usually include capital gains tax and documentary stamp tax. Fifth, once payment is completed, the proof of payment is submitted to the BIR. Sixth, the BIR will then process the documents. Processing time can vary depending on the BIR office and the completeness of the submitted documents. Seventh, once everything is in order, the eCAR is issued. Taxes related to the eCAR. The taxable value is the amount where all other computations will be derived. It is the highest among the following: the selling price or the zonal value, or the fair market value. However, starting year 2026, SMV or schedule market values will replace zonal values for computation. The first tax to pay is one of either capital gains tax or donor's tax or estate tax, is usually 6% of the taxable value. The next one to pay is documentary stamp tax or DST. This tax is typically 1.5% of the taxable value. These taxes must be settled before the BIR can issue the eCAR. Helpful tips when processing an eCAR. When processing an eCAR, there are several important things to keep in mind to avoid delays or unexpected costs. First, make sure that the taxes are paid within 30 days after the notarization of the transaction document. Missing this deadline may result in penalties and interest. Second, carefully check that the property details match exactly between the title and the tax declaration. Third, confirm that the real property tax (RPT) has been updated for the current year. Fourth, if the property is within a condominium or managed building, the certificate of non-tenancy should be current. This document is typically issued by the Property Management Office and is usually required to be dated within the same month of submission. Fifth, taxes should generally be processed at the BIR office where the property is located. However, in cases of donation, the transaction may sometimes be processed at the BIR office where the donor is registered. Finally, it is very important to check whether the property is being used for business purposes. If the property is used in business, the transaction may also be subject to value-added tax or VAT, which can significantly increase the total tax payable. Being aware of these details ahead of time can help make the eCAR process smoother and prevent costly surprises. Finally, knowledge is one of the most valuable investments you can make, more important than the property itself. The more you understand how real estate works, the better protected you become as an owner, seller, or buyer. Always remember to invest in yourself, stay curious, and keep learning. Thank you, and feel free to explore more resources like this, or post your property at manilaopenhouse.com.